The rain fell in heavy sheets, casting an eerie glow upon the desolate streets as I navigated my way through the labyrinth of darkness. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding like a relentless drum. It was another late night in the city, another round of passengers to pick up and drop off. But tonight, as I would come to learn, was far from ordinary. The notification pinged on my phone, a call for an Uber ride. My instincts kicked in, guiding me to the pin dropped on the map. The location was remote, nestled at the outskirts of town, surrounded by gnarled trees that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. I pulled up to the address, a dilapidated house that seemed to sag under the weight of its own history. A shiver crept down my spine as I waited, the silence broken only by the steady rhythm of raindrops against my windshield. Finally, a figure emerged from the shadows and approached the car. He was a tall man, his features obscured by the hood of his jacket. He slipped into the back seat without a word, and a chill swept over the interior of the car. "Where to?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to maintain composure. "Anywhere," he replied in a hushed tone that sent a shudder through me. "Just drive." As I pulled away from the curb, I stole a glance at the rearview mirror, catching a fleeting glimpse of his face. His eyes were hollow, devoid of emotion, and they seemed to pierce through the very fabric of my being. Swallowing hard, I turned my attention back to the road, my fingers gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The man's directions were vague and erratic, guiding me through a labyrinth of narrow, winding roads. Each turn seemed to take us deeper into the heart of the forest, the trees closing in around us like an inky abyss. My pulse quickened as a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew something was amiss, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The man's breathing grew heavier, and I stole another glance in the rearview mirror. His hood had fallen back, revealing a face that was twisted and contorted, as if caught in a perpetual state of agony. I clenched my jaw, my heart racing as I struggled to keep my focus on the road. Suddenly, the man let out a guttural scream, a sound that pierced the air and sent shivers down my spine. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a halt. My eyes darted to him in horror, his face now inches from mine, his breath cold and rancid. "Keep driving," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper that echoed in the confines of the car. "Or you'll join them." Them? My heart raced as I glanced around, my eyes widening in terror as I saw figures emerging from the shadows. They were gaunt and ghostly, their eyes sunken and their bodies draped in tattered garments. They surrounded the car, their fingers scratching against the windows, their hollow whispers filling the air. With a surge of adrenaline, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, the car lurching forward as I left the haunting figures behind. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the nightmare that had enveloped me. I had to escape, had to find a way out of this living nightmare. As I drove on, the road seemed to stretch endlessly before me, the forest growing denser with every passing mile. The man in the back seat remained silent now, his gaze fixed ahead, his face a mask of twisted anticipation. And then, in the distance, I saw it. A flickering light, a lone gas station that stood like a beacon of hope. I pulled into the station, my hands trembling as I cut the engine. The man in the back seat slowly opened the door, his movements deliberate and unnerving. With a final glance in my direction, he stepped out into the rain-soaked night, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. Had it all been a hallucination, a nightmare born from exhaustion and fear? But then I saw the scratches on the windows, the lingering traces of their presence. It was real. They were real. Trembling, I stepped out of the car and approached the gas station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow that seemed to dance with the shadows. The attendant behind the counter glanced up, his eyes widening as he took in my disheveled appearance. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I opened my mouth to speak, to recount the horrors I had witnessed, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the inexplicable? How could I convey the terror that had consumed me? With a shuddering breath, I nodded and forced a smile. "Just a long night on the road," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As I left the gas station behind and got back into the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the darkness itself held secrets too horrifying to comprehend. I drove through the night, my grip on the steering wheel unyielding, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The rain continued to fall, each drop a reminder of the nightmare I had endured. And as the first light of dawn broke through the darkness, I knew that I would never forget that night. The night I had driven into the heart of terror itself, guided by the horrors that lurk in the shadows.